March 22nd, 1961. It's after 6 p.m., and three Queens teenagers make their way just over the Queens-Long Island border into the neighborhood of Manhasset, Long Island. They're inside a 1955 Chevrolet vehicle, which had been converted into a hot rod speed machine, unrecognizable from its original factory birth. The vehicle had been painted a dark green, the front grille replaced with a Cadillac grille, a louvered hood, a raked body, which meant the back end of the vehicle had been higher than the front end. No hubcaps, Buick rear lights, and spotlights, which replaced the rearview mirrors. Little of anything original had been left, including the motor, which had been swapped out for a supercharged, air-cooled one, which would have made it sound obnoxiously loud to many onlookers. Law enforcement said the vehicle was capable of reaching speeds of 130 miles per hour. The hunk of metal on wheels, a growling speed demon, perfectly fit for the three young men inside, who were just about to flush their lives down the drain. At around 6:30 p.m., they arrived at the Food Fair supermarket at 1360 Northern Boulevard of Manhasset. The market lies on a stretch of road referred to as the Miracle Mile, a district historically known for high-end shops, serving the well-to-do community members of the area. They arrived to the lot behind the supermarket and watched manager Raymond Tickler and assistant manager Frank Gagliardi readying to close shop. They pull out and park adjacent to the lot at the intersection of Brinkerhoff Lane and 3rd Street. They step out of the vehicle, pull ski masks over their faces, and make their way to the Food Fair market. As assistant manager Frank Gagliardi exits the rear of the market, the men produce revolvers and a sawed-off shotgun and force the man back in. They would bound and gag him, leaving him helpless on the supermarket floor. They then reach manager Raymond Tickler and force him to open up the safe. The three men take $3,000 worth of bills and $200 worth of coins. If adjusted for inflation, these guys would be looking at a $30,000 score today. They make their way out and warn manager Tickler not to sound the alarm. They exit the market and make a run for it, adrenaline rushing through their bodies, like the fuel through the carburetor of the 1955 Hell machine that awaited them. Before they can get into the vehicle, they are halted by 32-year-old Nassau County Patrolman Joseph Coote, who orders them to freeze. Two of the teens stop, with the exception of one, who produces a sawed-off shotgun and fires at Patrolman Joseph Coote. The first blast hits Coote on his left side. He spins around from the impact and is soon hit with a second blast, which hits the left side of his head. He falls down to the pavement and takes his last breaths. The teens drop the proceeds from the heist at the scene and speed off into the night. Little did they know, a man had been watching the whole thing go down. And in a stroke of luck, the onlooker, who was described as a hot rod enthusiast, said the car was loud and very odd-looking. He was able to give a great description of the vehicle. Not only that, but the rear window of the vehicle had a for sale sign on it, and he was able to partially make out the number listed on the sign. Police would investigate the tip and ask some local hot rodders for help in their search. By noon the next day, they would make their first arrest. They haul in 19-year-old William Stanbridge of 3434 192nd Street in Flushing, owner of the hot rod, who worked as a bricklayer and had recently wed his wife Marilyn, who gave birth to their first child. Then, 20-year-old John Closter, a painter out of Elmont, Long Island, would be apprehended. And finally, 19-year-old Robert Moll of 3217 200th Street in Bayside, a heroin-addicted teen who worked as a machinist and the one responsible for using the shotgun and taking the life of Patrolman Joseph Coote. Moll went hiding out in his friend Ilda Ruiz's home in Manhattan after seeing a movie with friend and fellow Bayside native Billy Britton. Police tracked Moll down after questioning Britton at his Bayside residence. The three young men would be identified as members of a street gang known as the Bayside West Zombies, a gang of criminals who operated out of the neighborhood of Bayside, Queens, a community in the northeastern section of Queens, which sits by Little Neck Bay and the Long Island Sound. They had been a part of a larger movement of post-war street gangs, which rose up in New York City through the 1950s and 60s, eventually referred to as greaser gangs. The term greaser had originally been reserved for car mechanics and even used as a racial slur for Hispanic Americans. But by the 1960s, it became a way to describe these young gangs of troublemakers who fought over the neighborhood territory and committed numerous crimes for and against each other. They could be described exactly how you'd imagine: blue jeans, t-shirts, leather jackets, big hair, and a love for fast cars and motorcycles. Hollywood didn't just make this aesthetic up. It was a reality for many young men, causing havoc on the streets of New York City and beyond. The Bayside West Zombies had been causing trouble and going at it with rival gangs since the 1950s. In September of 1956, an all-out brawl would erupt on the streets of Bayside when rival gang the Astoria Gents, out of Astoria, Queens, came looking for trouble. This would end with the Astoria Gents fleeing the scene at a high rate of speed before being apprehended by police. Members of both gangs would be hit with numerous charges, including felonious assault. The news would state that these gangs all had one thing in common: they dressed, acted, talked, sneered, and snarled the same way. The archetypal greasers, if you will. In May of 1958, future cop killer Robert Moll would be arrested with zombie members John Foran and William Kingsland, all teenagers. They had thrown traffic enforcement police officer George Borling to the floor and beat the crap out of him while he was down. In June of 1958, 16-year-old William Stambridge, one of the robbers at the Food Fair supermarket incident, would be arrested with fellow zombie members Henry Wankmuller and Walter Moll, who was the brother of Robert Moll. They beat up a youth from Astoria, Queens, who was leaving a party with his girlfriend. Earlier in that same year, Walter Moll would be arrested for his involvement in a gang assault of 2 honor students from Bayside High School. The men would be identified as zombie members, as they all had the letter Z tattooed on their hands. It would be in November of 1958 that things would get a little more serious for these up-and-coming criminals. On the night of November 22nd, 1958, Robert Moll, William Kingsland, and his brother Warren Kingsland were walking on 33rd Avenue in Bayside. They would be shot at multiple times by a passing vehicle. Warren would be hit in the leg and survive his injuries. Luckily for the other two, they would not be hit. The signs were all there for these youths. Up until this point, their early adventures in criminality had resulted in physical violence, jail, and now a near-death experience. Unfortunately, some of these zombies just never shaped up. John Closter, William Stambridge, and Robert Moll would be brought into Roslyn, Long Island's 6th Precinct for questioning. After hours of interrogation, the 3 teens would confess to their crimes. It would be at the 6th Precinct that this photo of Robert Moll would be taken. The 19-year-old had numerous tattoos: hearts, an eagle, stars, and others. But one tattoo would stand out amongst them all. In small script lettering, right on his chest, the words, "I hate cops." Incredibly fitting for a young man who just took a patrolman's life. At the time the photo was taken, Moll had been under the influence of numerous narcotics, which he scored during his time hiding out in Manhattan. In the hours before his apprehension, he had consumed 2 bottles of homemade codeine cough medicine and 6 items which he referred to as goofballs, which were a mixture of morphine and half a $7 fix of heroin. It would be 20 minutes before his apprehension that he took his last goofball and spent the ride from Manhattan to Long Island, nodding out in the back of the police cruiser. On Tuesday, March 28, 1961, William Stambridge, John Closter, and Robert Moll would all be indicted in a Nassau County, Long Island court. They would each be hit with 2 first-degree felony murder charges, one being premeditated felony murder, and another being the charge of murder during the commission of a crime. They had also been hit with grand larceny, robbery, and assault charges. The 3 zombies could be facing the electric chair. Numerous family members would attend court that day, including Robert Moll's mother, Effie, who would be asked about her son's "I Hate Cops" tattoo. She would state, "That was put on several years ago when he got drunk. He didn't want it put there." There was also William Stambridge's mother, Louise, who stated that her husband, William's stepfather, was a policeman. No doubt, an incredibly heavy burden to put on the family. And also William Stambridge's young wife, Marilyn, who stated that William had been a dope addict, but as of late, was clean. John Closter Sr. would also be there, but would shove his way past reporters and refuse to comment at all. Nassau County District Attorney Manuel Levine had vowed that it would be a speedy trial, and justice would be served for the murder of Patrolman Joseph Coote. The trial would begin on Monday, October 30th, 1961, presided over by Supreme Court Justice Frank Galata. The defense for the three young men would immediately try to dismiss the idea that the act was premeditated, stating that they were simply surprised by Officer Coote's presence and acted instantaneously when he appeared. Robert Moll's "I Hate Cops" tattoo would also be a theme throughout the trial, a certain indictment against the character of the man who pulled the trigger of his sawed-off shotgun on the night of March 22, 1961. Robert Moll's two friends, Bayside native Billy Britton and Manhattan native Ildo Ruiz, would both make appearances as witnesses. They would tell the court that during the time Moll was with them in Manhattan, Moll would confess to them that he had shot a policeman out in Long Island. With the initial admission from the three teens in regard to their role in the crime and the witness testimony, the trial would in fact be a speedy one, just as District Attorney Manuel Levine promised. After 6 weeks of deliberations, the jury would find them guilty of numerous crimes. The jury recommended William Stambridge and John Closter be guilty of first-degree manslaughter, 10 to 20 years, first-degree robbery, 15 to 30 years, and 2 counts of assault, 5 to 10 years. Robert Moll, the cop-hating teen who ended the life of Patrolman Joseph Coote, will be handed the more serious charges of guilt. Felony first-degree murder, committing a murder while in the act of a felony, and second-degree murder or premeditated murder. This all equaled the electric chair, or natural life behind bars for the 19-year-old. However, the jury recommended that Judge Galata have mercy on Robert Moll and spare him the electric chair. On Friday, January 5th, 1962, the three would learn their fate. William Stambridge and John Closter would be sentenced to 35 to 70 years in prison for their crimes. Robert, "I Hate Cops" Moll, will be sentenced to life in prison. Justice Frank Galata would take the jury's advice and spare Robert Moll's life. He would not get the electric chair. He explained his willingness not to go against the jury's recommendation, but would state, "To release Moll would be like releasing a bloodthirsty madman in the midst of children. I hate cops. That shows your attitude toward life. You were given 9 opportunities by society to straighten your life out," referring to the amount of times Moll had been arrested. "You have finished your life." Moll looking on in shock, taking a step back, realizing what he had done, finally sinking in. He would then address all three. "You three have not shown one iota of remorse, sorrow, or repentance during the trial. You all had a jocular devil-may-care attitude. And I heard you, Robert Moll, jibe about what deputy sheriff would sit on your lap once the switch was pulled." In just 7 months' time, from the night Patrolman Joseph Coote of the Nassau County Police Department was gunned down, justice had been served. Robert Moll was off to Sing Sing. Stambridge and Closter were off to Greenhaven. In the coming years, the trio would try to appeal their sentences. Their defense was that they were coerced into their confessions, and they would even state that they were physically assaulted by police during interrogation. However, the New York justice system wasn't hearing it. All appeals would be thrown right into the trash. Poughkeepsie Journal, December 24th, 1971. 7 given clemency by governor. John Closter, 30, was sent to Greenhaven State Prison in 1961 after being sentenced to 25 to 50 years for a Nassau County grocery store robbery in which an accomplice killed a policeman. A spinal tumor made him a quadriplegic, and his paralysis was the principal reason for his sentence cut, the governor's office said. Now, I first will make note that this article gets the sentencing wrong because Closter had received 35 to 70, not 25 to 50, but these are often mistakes that news outlets make. So we'll give him a pass on that. I will also say that numerous other outlets had also reported that Closter had received clemency. Numerous outlets outside the Poughkeepsie Journal. Now, I will also say this. On the website, stonegreasers.com, which is an excellent website, talks about the greaser culture of the 50s and 60s, many gangs operating in New York City at the time, and other states as well. It has a little section on the Bayside West Zombies. It's got a little information here. You can check it out. I'll link it to this video. In this photo here, it purports to show a picture of Red Stambridge, which was also apparently a nickname of William Stambridge, and John Closter on the left there in the orange muscle shirt. And it says that this photo was taken in 1974 in Greenhaven Prison. Now, unfortunately for Closter, he had ended up with a tumor in his spine and was confined to a wheelchair, which is what being a quadriplegic is. So I find it implausible that this is a picture of Closter on the left and Stambridge on the right, taken in 1974 in Greenhaven State Prison, considering that Closter was granted clemency in 1971. So I just wanted to put that out there. Do with that information what you will. I just wanted to clear some things up because I am linking this website to this video upload. Now, in the case of Closter getting a tumor, ending up in a wheelchair, it's a horrible thing. But some would say it's karma. Now let's get to William Stambridge. He would be paroled in the 1970s. After spending over a decade locked up. He wouldn't take long to get in trouble again. He would return to his old area of Queens, New York City, and hold residence in Flushing. In 1979, he was back in the papers. He had been arrested with a group of people for his involvement in a heroin ring operating out of Buffalo, New York. The man at the head was this guy, Pascal Politano, a member of the Magadino crime family, which operated out of Buffalo, New York. After being arrested in July with a woman named Denise Smith, who was also in on the dealings, he would be officially indicted on July 18, 1979. He was accused of being a drug runner in what law enforcement described as a French Connection-style multi-million-dollar heroin ring that was bringing drugs in from Asia. With his parole violation, he was certainly in deep shit. Luckily for him, his parole violation was dropped, and he would be sentenced to 18 months in prison in 1980. If not for that, he could have got himself another 10 years in the slammer. Now, much like John Closter, all new leads on William Stambridge are empty on my side. And last but not least, Robert, I hate cops Moll. What exactly would become of the 19-year-old who shotgunned to death a patrolman on March 22nd, 1961? Well, he would be released in the 1980s after serving over 20 years of what would have been a life sentence. Oh, Robert Moll. Robert Moll. You couldn't just stay out of trouble, could you? Poughkeepsie Journal, June 7th, 1986. Kavanaugh to see if jury will hear case. Ulster County District Attorney Michael Kavanaugh will soon decide whether a Highland man accused of cutting his girlfriend with a knife, should be brought before a grand jury, said Assistant District Attorney. The defendant, Robert Moll, served from 1961 to 1982 for the murder of a Nassau County police officer. Lloydtown police accused him at 1:45 a.m. Tuesday of cutting his girlfriend with an 8-inch butcher knife, said Chief Jerry Lane. Moll, 47, of Route 9W Highland, was charged with second-degree assault, a felony, and menacing, a misdemeanor, Lane said. Kavanaugh is waiting for trial memo from the Lloyd court that will help him decide whether the crime Moll is accused of is serious enough to be brought before a grand jury, said Assistant District Attorney Michael Kirk. Police said that just before the arrest, Moll had beaten up Joanne Meadows and assaulted her with a knife during an argument at the residence they share. Meadows, who was left with cuts and bruises, was treated at St. Francis Hospital and has since been released, police said. Moll was on life parole after serving 21 years of a 40-year-to-life sentence for the 1961 shooting death of Nassau County Police Officer Joseph Coote, police said. He was sent to Ossining State Correctional Facility, formerly Sing Sing, and later to the Eastern Correctional Facility at Napanock, said police. Coote was killed during a supermarket robbery attempt, police said. Details of the murder were not available from Nassau County Police. Moll was arraigned at Lloyd Court on Tuesday's charges in order to Ulster County Jail on $20,000 bail, police said. He remained in jail Friday and will not be released without a parole board hearing, since the charges could represent a violation of his parole, said Lane. In my opinion, he no doubt went back to prison for this. One doesn't just violently beat and stab a woman after being on life parole and get away with it. But where is Robert Moll today? Where are all three of these men? It's certainly possible that one, if not all, could be alive. If so, they'd be in their 80s. I have no further leads, ladies and gentlemen. But if you do, send me over an email at NewYorkCityCrimeSpot@gmail.com. I hope everybody enjoyed this part of the program. But before we go, let's head over to the streets of Bayside, Queens, and the streets of Manhasset, Long Island. Talk a little bit more about these Bayside West Zombies and the death of Patrolman Joseph Coote in March of 1961. All right, everyone. So right now we are in Bayside, Queens, 33rd Ave, and right straight ahead is Francis Lewis Boulevard. If you remember the story, one of these characters actually ends up getting shot over here. Most likely done by a rival crew known as the Astoria Gents. One of the beefs around the city with these greaser gangs. And to think about something like that happening here now, a local kid getting shot, it's kind of something that, you know, you wouldn't think would happen. This is a really good neighborhood. Even back then, actually, it was a really good neighborhood. So yeah, let's take a walk and talk more about these zombie characters. And we're going to head down this way, and we're going to head to a place where these zombies were known to hang out. It's a little place referred to as Zombie Alley. Now we're also down the block of the old residence of Mr. Robert Moll, the 19-year-old teen who shot and killed Patrolman Joseph Coote. It's a beautiful Saturday, and I hope everyone enjoyed the story beforehand. It's kind of one that's a little bit lost to history, and I think it's important to do those types of stories. And throughout this walk, I'll show pictures from what this area would have looked like in the 40s. Now, this story takes place mid-50s to early 60s, but not much would have changed since then. So take that into consideration. Many of these old buildings are still here. Just the facades have changed. Okay, so we're heading towards what is called 32nd Avenue, which was the hangout for these guys. Now, I had heard of this gang many years ago, and I dismissed it, and then I decided to cover it because it's local history, local to an area that I kind of grew up in. So I figured it was worth it, and I found out a lot of stuff. So now if we look to the right, over there at 3217, that would have been the former home of Robert I Hate Cops Moll. And what these guys would have done was they would have hung out on this avenue here, 32nd, and right up ahead would have been what was known as Zombie Alley. Zombie Alley. Now keep in mind, this is also before like Night of the Living Dead has even come out. Not that the word zombie wasn't in the culture at that time, but you know, you probably would have had to really be into like certain movies and like horror movies and like literature and stuff to, you know, it wasn't until like I think late 60s when Night of the Living Dead would come out where the word would like really explode. But it's a word that goes back, you know, many generations, not even of this country's origin, I believe. But before we do that, let me just put up a photo from the 1940s so you can kind of see where it says Great Wall Restaurant. A little to the left, you see like there's a double doors with a mailbox there. Now, in the photo that I'm putting up now, you'll see that those double doors were never there, and that used to lead, you can see the opening to the alleyway that would go through there. Now we're gonna go enter that alleyway right now. The alleyway once known as the Zombie Alley, where these old greaser kids used to hang out. Robert Moll, William Stambridge, John Closter, and the types. So let's make our way in there. This is like one of the rare like alleyways like that are in this neighborhood, by the way. Like it's not really a thing around here where like there's these old alleyways and shit. I mean, some like separating some of these apartment buildings, but this one is a little different. It's got an old school feel to it. And we're gonna go in there and check it out. So we're gonna make a left right here. And we're gonna enter Zombie Alley. Now the main alley, like where that opening would have been, is this gonna be this alley right here. This spot right here. Somebody's been balling it up. So this would have been the alleyway here for Zombie Alley. And down here we have this longer alleyway here. So this would have been their whole hangout here. You can picture these old 50s and 60s, you know, young teens, lost, no direction, stuck on heroin. School is boring. I'm sure they had the same sentiment. That's why they were doing what they were doing. You could picture them with their hot rods and, you know, their leather jackets and their jeans with the cuffs. And, you know, like I said in the story, you know, this wasn't just a movie aesthetic. This is reality for a lot. You know, they took it from somewhere. You know, it was a natural thing that propped up in the post-war America throughout the country. But of course, New York City being so many communities, so many neighborhoods, things just got really territorial, and there were so many places for these people to stake their claim. So now we're entering the other side here of the alleyway. So the other side of the alleyway here. And we're looking down on 32nd Avenue again. So yeah, this is the whole area where these guys would hang out, ladies and gentlemen. These bad teens who, 3 of them threw their lives down the drain. Let's get a cool look at the alley here. You see those old stairs, little ladder. These buildings are very old, early 20th century. We'll take one more walk down Zombie Alley, and let's wrap right around. And then after this little Bayside Queens tour we're gonna go over to just over the Queens border into a little area called Manhasset, to the former location of the Food Fair supermarket and the location where Patrolman Joseph Coote lost his life in 1961. Maybe I'll grab a Bud Light after that. Probably not. All right. So let's continue on, and we'll get one more look down this main alleyway right here, which is commonly referred to as like the official like zombie alley, but you know, it would have been this whole thing in reality. I think this is a cool view right here we can maybe get. There you go. That's a cool view. Somebody's balling it up back there. Just picture these old greaser kids hanging back here, plotting their next score, meeting girls, maybe dope sick in the corner, out of school, messing up at home. Not a care in the world. I'll see you guys in a minute. We'll be in Long Island, New York. All right, everybody, we are in Manhasset, Long Island. Not far over the Queens border, right up ahead, that's Northern Boulevard. And that goes way down. And believe it or not, this goes into Queens all the way almost to Manhattan, by the 59th Street Bridge. It is a long stretch of road. Now, this is referred to as the Miracle Mile Shopping District. If you remember the old Billy Joel song, Still Rock and Roll, he says, "Are you gonna cruise the Miracle Mile?" Well, he's, you know, talking about this, essentially. Yeah, so on the night of March 22nd, 1961, Robert I Hate Cops Moll, William Stambridge, and John Closter decide that they're going to come to this shopping center to my right, which was the former location at 1360 Northern Boulevard, the former location of the Food Fair supermarket. Now, we discussed in the story what they did there. They ended up tying up the manager and the assistant manager. Something's going on. They ended up tying up the assistant manager and the manager, and yeah, then they made their way out. So what they did initially was they had parked down here on a street called Brinkerhoff and 3rd Street. We're on Brinkerhoff right now, but we're gonna head to 3rd Street because it would be at that intersection where Patrolman Joseph Coote would lose his life on that night. And we'll look to the left over here. We're not going to go in the shopping center, but you can kind of see up there, you know, up over there. That's a shopping center. You still got a supermarket there. You got like King Cullen, and then you got, I believe there's a Michael's and, you know, art store and some other stuff over there. But what these guys did was they had parked outside, and I guess they ran in there. And ultimately what happens is they come down here. Now they're getting back to their car, so we're approaching Brinkerhoff and 2nd Street. And once again, we're in Manhasset, Long Island. A little bit of an upper crust neighborhood, you know, if you will. No, it's a very nice area. So let's get over there so we can look at the scene where everything went down, where these 3 young men ruined their lives in 1961. And we talked about their exploits post-prison, and, you know, these guys are just, some of the worst of the worst. And I hate to say that about young teens because they're teens, you know, they're not even 20 years old. There's so much growth in the brain and all that other stuff, but it's just, they were really just not good people, man. It's a shame. And I'm sure they brought much shame to their families. So we are approaching Brinkerhoff and 3rd Street. And we'll talk for a minute and then we'll get out of here and we'll close this out. I thought it would be cool to end this off on some street footage, you know. So here we got a little area here. All right. So let's look at this street sign here. Brinkerhoff Lane and 3rd. Right there. So it would be at this intersection that Patrolman Coote would intercept Robert Moll, William Stambridge, and John Closter. He would approach them, tell them to stop. Now Stambridge and Closter would stop. I guess they had a quick moment of clarity where, you know, it just wasn't worth it. You know, robbing $3,000 and taking this to the next level of where it ultimately came to. But Robert Moll, the troubled junkie teen, decided it wasn't enough. He pulled out his sawed-off shotgun and struck Joseph Coote twice, ending his life right here at 3rd Street and Brinkerhoff Lane. March 22nd, 1961. Now, interesting story about the legacy of Patrolman Joseph Coote. You know, in 2001, I mean, almost 40 years after the event happened, you know, they were trying to get a memorial for Coote, and some of the politicians and community people in this area, they just weren't having it for some reason. I don't know why. I don't know what they just felt like, oh, nobody would know what it was. I even read an article, oh, what are you going to put a street sign? No one's even going to know what that was. It doesn't matter if people know what it is. I mean, you're doing it for remembrance, and you're doing it for the family and the legacy of someone who lost their life. I mean, but that's how you see these community politics and all this. I don't want to get into it, but it's crazy. So it would be in 2021 that they actually had a real big ceremony here at this corner. They laid a wreath down, and then they made their way to another park in Long Island. And I was told that there was a street sign here, but I don't see anything. I do not see Coote's name here at all. I just see Brinkerhoff and 3rd. So I could have got some bad info, although, you know, it could possibly be that his name is placed somewhere else in this area. So let's walk up back this way, and we'll look down Brinkerhoff Lane and 3rd. And as I discussed in the story, you know, there was a guy that was like looking at this kind of going down, and, you know, he was like a hot rod enthusiast. So he kind of saw, you know, what the car was looking, even though the car was like kind of crazy looking. It was a 55 Chevy, but it had like Buick parts and Cadillac parts, and it was loud and it was fast. So the guy was like kind of not too sure exactly what it was, but he gave a really good description of the car, and the car had part of a you know, number on it, Stambridge's number. It was for sale. So they were able to kind of track it down, ultimately talking to some of the hot rod scene, and, you know, within a day, you know, they had scooped them all up, you know, luckily. So let's get one more look down. Once again, up there, back behind us is Northern Boulevard. Let's get one look down here on Brinkerhoff Lane and 3rd. Right down here. These streets, like many I visit, and like many that you walk every day, hold a lot of memories of the past. Ghosts of the past, if you will. And it's important that we don't forget these stories. And that's my purpose of this channel. I know I do a lot of mob stuff, but I do a lot of stuff that's not mob, and I'll do even more of that going forward, because it's more fulfilling to find these old stories and unearth them and bring them out to talk about some New York history. And I hope everyone enjoyed this one, and let's just give a rest in peace to Patrolman Joseph Coote, who at 32 years old senselessly lost his life right up ahead on Brinkerhoff and 3rd Lane. So I'll see you guys, you know, we'll talk soon. There's good stuff in the works for the channel, and I really hope you enjoyed this story. I'm gonna push this out soon, and hopefully people share it. You know, I think this is the type of story that is like, I mean, I don't want to pump myself up or pump the story up, but I mean, this is like, even like a screenplay or a story about something, you know, like an updated story about the greaser culture of New York City and, you know, the pitfalls and a lot of things that happened back then. I think we're so stuck on these old stories, you know, like the West Side Stories, and, you know, we're so stuck in that. And, you know, I think we need something new. And I think a story like this would, you know, make for some good cinema. But I'm putting it out there, and, you know, we'll see. You never know what happens in life. I'm talking too much. Everybody, have a beautiful week ahead. And once again, like, subscribe, and, you know, keep sharing the channel, and I hope you enjoy it. I love everybody. Have a great week.